We're now going to be looking at this B note, focusing around that B note, creating the same shape as using this as the center or focal point, which means we're looking at the intervals related to the Locrian mode. Now, oftentimes when people hear the term Locrian mode, they have a bit of fear and they kind of run away from that one, or they're going to say, I don't need the Locrian mode. That's the weird one. That's the crazy one. You stay away from that. That's like the crazy person in the bar who's acting all crazy, and you just keep your distance. But no, we're gonna go into it. If you actually talk to the crazy person, sometimes they like know stuff. So the Locrian mode is actually important for a few different things. So we're gonna basically kind of first give a recap of the project, why you might want to learn the Locrian mode here, and then how we're going to do it from this bottom string, because as with our other modes, we usually learn things by learning open position, what people call the cowboy chords, the great chords from open position here, that we can then move up the guitar, breaking the guitar into like, 5 shapes that nice and conveniently, and of course, match our 4 fingers to some extent, because that's how the guitar is designed. And then we can create our scales around those positions on the fretboard. That's one way to basically look at it. And most of the time, we kind of learn the fretboard. We get our cheat sheet and we say, I'm going to learn these top 2 strings, try to get the notes on those top 2 strings, and then I'll use just 2 of those caged system chords, which is going to be, if I'm on the top string, then I'm just going to convert all these notes into either a major or a minor E shape. Major, minor E shape, bar chords, major, minor bar chords, right? And if it's on the A, I'm going to convert the major or minor A's to a bar shape, major or minor A. And then we kind of leave it there, right? We don't really learn we don't even learn like what the actual notes are that I'm playing. If I play this bar chord, it's like, what am I actually playing? I don't really know except for that top note. If I play the bar chord from the A, I know it's an A, and that shape makes an A major. That's all I need to know, right? But it would be nice if you can build something from this A, and this A, and so on and so forth, right? So we'd like to be able to build things from the bottom in particular, because that's going to be useful if you're layering stuff, which is pretty cool to do these days with all the fancy computer software you got. Be nice to be able to layer some heavy chords on top and maybe some higher pitched chords over it. Or if you're playing in a band, it's kind of outdated these days. People don't even do bands anymore, I guess, but it'd still be cool. Then someone's doing the bass. You might want to learn chords that are going to be on the higher register so that you can play something and not be stepping on each other's toes. That's another reason to kind of look at that. So how are we going to basically learn this? We're going to be thinking of comparing everything to the major scale, using the major scale as our key, and then try to see the modes as they relate to the major scale. So as we do that, you're probably thinking, I'm not going to ever play in the Locrian mode. Most people won't be playing in Locrian. That's kind of a weird thing to do. But it's quite common that you could play in any other mode and you're going to hit the Locrian note. In other words, if I'm like let's go up to the top one. Let's compare it to if I'm playing in the key of C. So how do we learn this? We learn the major scale, which we're going to look at in the key of C, but the same principle applies if we learn the relative positions rather than the notes that are in a scale like the key of C, right? It's going to work for every scale if we learn the relative positions. So what are we going to do? We're going to say, well, I'm going to learn the major scale or Ionian mode, then I'm going to learn the minor scale and try to see how it relates to the major scales in terms of intervals, and then I can basically compare the other minor modes to the minor or Aeolian mode, because there's only going to be one interval difference, and I'm going to compare the other major modes to the main major, the major scale or Ionian mode. There's only one interval difference. But now we're on the Locrian. It's like, what am I going to do with that one? That one's not even, you're not even telling it. It's not even part of the story that you tell every time. And it's like, well, yeah, the Locrian, so how does the Locrian fit in? It's kind of like a minor scale because it has a minor third, but it also has a flat fifth. That's the thing that makes it crazy, the flat fifth. So you can kind of think of it as basically another minor, but then it has the flat fifth. So in other words, if I'm playing like in the key of C, and I'm just converting all these top notes that are in my musical alphabet into a major or minor bar chord, otherwise known as an E major or E minor, and anything that starts on this second string, I'm converting it just into an A major or A minor bar chord if I want to play a major or minor of any of the notes that are here, but except when I run into that B note. What am I going to do when I run into the B note? Because I can't build a major or minor because I have this, that's when the Locrian happens. So it still has a minor third, but it's going to have a flat fifth. That's the weird thing that comes into play. So I have to know that because then I can play, then I have to accommodate for that when I get to that note if I'm noodling around. So just from a logistical standpoint, how might this work if I'm playing in the key of any of the modes, such as the major scale or the minor scale, and I learn all of the notes on the top two strings of the guitar, the first thing I might start doing is say, well, I can always add a fifth to whatever I'm doing, which is a power chord, right? So I can play my power chord here. So the fifth is always going to be this shape, right? Boom, that's C, and then up here, right? You could play the fifth other ways, right? But that's this common power chord shape. Right? But then what happens when I get to that B? You're going to go, what if I get to the B? Well, then I have a problem because you could just not play it, or you could say, oh, I can just play that top note, or put the fourth in it, right? And then to the C, right? Or I can realize that it has the minor in it, or I can even keep the shape the same. Like I could. It's not going to sound horrible because now you've played a note outside of the key, but all the shapes that you played are symmetrical, so it still kind of works. That's kind of like what happens in the blues a lot. Or you go up, and that sounds kind of wonky, but you can see it leads into the home bass. So one way you can do it, that's what we often learn. We learn those power chords because then I don't have to worry about the major third or the minor third, but I might still have to, if I want to stay in the same key, worry about the fact that when I get to the Locrian one, then it's got a flat fifth on it. And then I can get a little bit more sophisticated and I can say, well, I'm going to convert all of these notes to a major or a minor. So it's a G major that fits in my key, right? And then it's an A minor that fits in my key. And then it's a C major that fits in my key. But what about the Locrian, right? The Locrian doesn't really fit, once again, in that key. So, right? So then I got to say, well, what is it? It's going to be a minor third and a flat fifth. So that's how, like, logistically, basically, it comes into play even when you're playing like basic kind of power chords. You have to compensate. Like the power chord will work 5 out of 6 times and then kind of work even on the last one if it sounds symmetrical, but it won't work if you're thinking about it being in the same key. You're going to play something out of key. It might not throw you off because you're playing symmetrical power chords, so the shape will be the same, but it won't be exactly in the same key, right? So that's one reason we need to know it logistically. The other thing we want to know, like logistically, why we want to know it, even if I don't play in the key of Locrian, is because what we're talking about here is that the Locrian can also be thought of as a modal chord, is the general idea. So in other words, most people basically, what we learn is we say, I'm gonna learn the scale, usually starting with the major scale. I'm gonna look at the notes in that scale, and then I'm just gonna convert the notes into first power chords, which is easy to do because almost all of them have a fifth in it, a normal perfect fifth. And then I'm going to try to convert them into the major and minor chords, which has distinctive characteristic of the third, right? So how do most people do that? Well, they play in the major scale and they say, well, the 1, 4, 5 has a major third and the 2, 3, 6 have a minor third, and then they ignore the Locrian altogether typically, but it still has a minor third, so you can kind of think of it as a minor. So that's what, and how do we do that? We convert those top 2 strings into our bar chords, top string, E major, E minor, second string down, A major, A minor. That's what the next thing that people often do in the order of the learning process. But that's restricting because I also need to be able to change to different keys, including the minor key, which most people will learn the minor key by basically memorizing that if I'm playing in minor as though it's a completely different scale, not related modally, that the 1, 4, 5 in the minor is all minors, right? And then they can learn which ones are minor and major to build from. But if we want to go beyond the 1, 3, 5 to the 7, 9, 11, and 13, and if we want to look at the other modes, like the Dorian mode or playing the Phrygian mode and so on, it makes sense for us to say, well, look, I'm not really just playing the 1, 4, 5. If I want to stay in the same key, I'm playing Ionian to the Lydian to the Mixolydian. So I'm not really thinking about these as separate scales in that case. I'm playing in the key of C. But when I get to like the 5 here, I'm going to say now I'm playing the Mixolydian modal chord. Why is that different? Because it's still going to have the same 1, 3, 5 as though I was playing a G major, because both the Mixolydian modal chord and the major modal chord have the same 1, 3, 5. But when I get to the 7, the Mixolydian is going to have a flat 7, a minor 7, and the major is going to have a major 7. So that's where it gets messed up. So what I'd like to be able to do when I start to think through this in a little bit more depth is to say, I'm playing modal chords. Now, why don't people talk in terms of modal chords, you might ask, and notice that I can't really name all my chords based on like a modal chord construction, because it's quite possible that I build a chord that's outside of the mode, that doesn't have one of the notes that are in the key that we are in. So when I name the modes, when I name a chord that's a complex chord, I have to name it in some convention that's going to fit everything, whether the note's in the key or not. And I'm going to do that by naming it as it relates to the root or the tonic. So I have to cover not only the intervals that are in the modal chord, but any interval that I could use could be a chord, right? But when we're playing in key, the question is, am I playing something that's in the key, a modal chord, all of the same notes that are here, or am I playing something that's out of key, which means usually I'm going to try to play something symmetrical, because that's the other way it can sound uniform, even though I'm not playing something in the same key, is going to be, the general idea. So that means that when we get to the Locrian, usually we're not going to play in Locrian, but we still want to learn the Locrian mode, because we're still going to think of it as a modal chord. When I get to that B note, I have to think, what am I going to do? I'm going to play the Locrian modal chord there. We call that a diminished chord, right? What's going to be the characteristic of it? Well, it still has a minor third, but in it, but then it has a flat fifth. It's going to be the general idea. That's going to be the general idea. Okay, so you can also see that this Locrian, now I'm also trying to think of all these notes here that are in the key. I kind of want to like name the notes as the starting point to all the different modes, right? So and that's movable when I go to a different key. So for example, the C and this shape is the Ionian mode, right? The D is the start of the Dorian mode. The G is the start of the Mixolydian mode, if I was to play the shape from that position, so that I can kind of memorize those positions by position, and then when I change to a different key, I can see that shape. So in any words, if I say that B right there is the start of the Locrian mode, right? That's the beginning of the Locrian mode. It's the 7th, if you think about it in relation to the major scale. And notice if you're in the major scale, then it's the leading tone that goes home to the C. And whenever you have that half step, it pulls in home to the home, right? So that half step is always going to give you that pull home. And so if I go over here, you can see it. Let's do it over here. You can see that if I build the chord, I have on the Locrian, instead of having a 5th that's normally out here, the 5th is going to be back here, and then I could pick up then the D. But the flavor of it is just these two. That's going to give you that kind of really. And then it leads home, right? Now, just to see how that kind of fits in, notice that the other thing that often leads into home, like the classic ways to go back home, is to either go to the 4th that leads home, or to the 5th that leads home, or to the 7 or Locrian. So for example, if I'm playing some kind of progression in the key of C, and then I go to the 4, which is an F. You see that sounds familiar? That's a closing thing. What if I play the 5th and lead it home, the G major to the C? See, that's a classic way to go home, right? Now, if I want to get a little bit more pull, then what I'm going to do, instead of playing the G like the normal G, I'm going to put in the 7, which is the flat 7. And that's going to, notice how that's similar to the Locrian. So instead of playing it like this, I'm going to pull in that flat 7. So now you get a different pull. Here's the normal G. Now here's it with a flat 7. So you get a different pull. Now that flat, now if I then look at the Locrian construction, notice I don't have the G up top, I have a D instead. So now you have it's a similar kind of construction, because both the G, it still has that half step going home, right? Is the general idea. But the Mixolydian also has this tensiony sound with the flat 5th in it. Okay, so let's give a general idea. So as we go down and measure the Locrian, remember the general idea is we're going to say we'll look at the normal intervals for the major scale, and then we consider the minor scale, which is kind of the opposite of the major scale, and then we compare the other minors to the minor scale, or Aeolian, because there's only one interval difference. And then the Locrian, we think of it as separate, but it's really like a minor scale with a flat 5th. So the way I would think about this, if you make a story in your mind, is you're going to say, okay, you got the major modes, which are more, you often think of as happy sounding modes, the Ionian, the Lydian, and the Mixolydian. They're in their own group. The Lydian and Mixolydian only has one interval difference from the Ionian, and the Mixolydian is kind of the one that kind of hangs out with the minors more because it has the flat 7. And then you've got the main minor, which is going to be the Aeolian. It's the main minor because it's the minor scale, and you would think that you would take all of the intervals here and keep the perfects and flat all of the majors to a minor, which is basically what happens, but doesn't happen with the Dorian. The Dorian keeps the minor second. The Phrygian keeps the minor second. The Aeolian keeps the minor second. And then the Dorian is a little bit more on the major side, because it has another major. It has the 2-note away major second, plus I believe it's the major 9-note away major 9. But the Phrygian is even more minor than the main minor. So the Phrygian is like you think you're minor scale. I'm more minor than you are because the Phrygian does what you would expect. It keeps all of the perfects the same and flattens all of the minors, including the second. So it's even crazier. Now, why don't we say that is the normal or the main minor, the Phrygian? Why isn't the Phrygian the main minor? If it does what we would expect, it flattens all of the majors to minor. Well, I think partially it's because we like the Aeolian more. The main minor is a little too crazy because that flat second sounds tensiony, right? It's a little too much. And possibly just from a logistics standpoint, if we make the Aeolian the main minor, then the other two minors, the Dorian and the Phrygian, only have one interval difference. So this one is actually closer to the other two. The other two are only one interval difference. Whereas if I made the Phrygian the main minor, and then I compared the Dorian and Aeolian to it, then there's going to be more than one interval difference to the Phrygian, right? So it's kind of doesn't work quite as well. And then the Locrian comes in, and remember the Locrian's what the crazy guy in the bar, and the Locrian's like, dude, I'm just as minor as you are, Phrygian. Plus, I've got a flat 5, and everybody's like, oh no, he's like broke a bottle on the bar because he's crazy. It's like because no one goes flat 5. No one goes flat 5, and actually. And that's not exactly true because the Lydian is also kind of crazy because it has a 6-note away interval, but it's not a flat 5, it's an augmented fourth. And because the Lydian hangs out with the cool crowd with the Ionian, they're like the rich kids, the Ionian and the Lydian and the mixed Lydian. And so even though this Lydian is crazy too, it's that he hangs out with the majors so no one really notices. But everybody thinks the Locrian is crazy because it's more minor than the main minor as the super minor Phrygian, plus it's got the crazy flat 5. All right, so that's the story. So let's look at the intervals here on the major. We've got a 0-note away perfect first, a 2-note away major second, a 4-note away major third, a 5-note away perfect fifth, a 5-note away perfect fourth, 7-note away perfect fifth, 9-note away major 7, 9-note away major 6, 11-note away major 7. What would we expect on the Locrian? The Locrian is more crazy than the major minor. It's as minor as can be, plus has a flat 5. So we would expect the Locrian to have the same perfects and all of the majors, including the second, which isn't the case with the main minor, the minor scale. We would expect all of the majors to be flattened to minors, half step down, and the fifth. Nobody messes with the fifth. Nobody messes with the fifth, but the Locrian does. The Locrian's like, I'm flattening the fifth, and people are like, whoa, dude, he just broke a bottle on and he's crazy. Okay, that's the story. All right, so then we're going to go down here and we'll go one by one from this B.